The man who disappeared behind a hoodie. A story of hidden pain and unexpected hope. Picture this. A man walks into every room wearing the same oversized hoodie, even when it's blazing hot outside. People stare. They whisper. They make assumptions. But what if I told you that under that fabric was a secret so heavy it crushed his spirit for over a decade? What if that hoodie wasn't just clothing, but armor protecting him from a world that had already decided who he was before giving him a chance to speak? This is the story of someone who became invisible in plain sight. Someone who learned that sometimes the things we carry on our bodies become the things that carry us away from life itself. And it's about the moment when one act of unexpected kindness changed everything. If stories about human resilience, about finding hope in the darkest places, about the power of being truly seen for who you are, if those stories matter to you, then what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Back to a day when a 19-year-old thought he was invincible, and how one split second in a gym would reshape the next 11 years of his life. The weight room was nearly empty that Tuesday morning. Just the rhythmic clank of metal plates, the low hum of ventilation, and the kind of silence that makes young men push harder than they should. Marcus had been lifting for months, not for any particular goal, just for the satisfaction of watching the numbers climb higher. Pride, really. The kind that makes you add extra weight just because the guy next to you is watching. He stood at the lat pull-down machine, chalk dust on his palms, back straight, focused. The bar felt heavier than usual, but he wasn't about to back down. Rep 5, 6, 7. And then it happened. Not a dramatic crack or scream of agony. Just a soft, subtle pop. Like a suction cup releasing behind his left shoulder blade. He froze mid-rep. The sensation was strange, not painful exactly, just off. Like something had shifted slightly out of place and then settled back in. He let the weight stack slowly return, rotated his arm experimentally. Everything seemed fine. Just a weird feeling that he shrugged off within minutes. That night, standing shirtless in his apartment bathroom, steam still clinging to the mirror from his shower, he noticed it. A small bulge, no bigger than a marble, sitting just below where his shoulder met his back. He pressed it with his fingertip. No pain. It felt firm but not hard. Just there. He told himself it was probably nothing. Muscle strain, maybe some swelling from pushing too hard at the gym. Things like this happened all the time, right? They went away on their own. He'd give it a week or two, maybe ice it a few times, and forget all about it. But the week stretched into a month, and the bump didn't disappear. If anything, it felt more present, like it was making itself at home. He started sleeping differently, avoiding his left side, wearing looser shirts that wouldn't pull against whatever was growing there. Marcus never talked about it. Not to his gym buddies, not to the girl he was casually seeing, not to anyone. There was something about acknowledging it out loud that felt dangerous, like saying the words would make it more real, more permanent. The months crawled by, and the mass grew slowly but steadily. What had started as a marble became a golf ball. The outline began to show through his clothes, just barely, but enough to make him self-conscious. He stopped wearing tank tops, traded them for loose-fitting t-shirts that concealed the growing intrusion. By the time he turned 21, the lump had become impossible to ignore. It pressed against his shirts now, creating a subtle but noticeable bulge in the fabric. He caught people's eyes lingering on his shoulder, quick glances followed by awkward looks away. The questions started coming. "What's that under your shirt?" a girl asked him one evening, her tone playful but curious. "Old sports injury," he lied smoothly. "Scar tissue." She seemed satisfied with the answer, but something inside Marcus shifted that night. A wall went up, invisible but solid. He stopped dating. He stopped going to pools or beaches. The lump had become more than just a physical presence. It was reshaping how he moved through the world. The stares became more frequent as the mass continued to grow. Not cruel stares, necessarily, but curious ones. The kind that made him feel like a puzzle people were trying to solve rather than a person they were trying to know. And somehow, that felt worse than outright judgment. He started wearing hoodies. At first, it was practical. A thick, oversized gray pullover that concealed the outline completely, soft enough to cushion the pressure when he leaned against walls or bus seats. When fall turned to winter, nobody questioned it. Just another guy layering up for the cold. But when winter became spring and then summer, and the hoodie never came off, people began to notice. "Don't you ever get hot in that thing?" his friend Eric asked one sweltering afternoon. "Nah, I run cold," Marcus replied, forcing a casual shrug. Eric gave him a look, half amused, half concerned. "Dude, you used to wear tank tops in the snow." Marcus laughed it off and steered the conversation elsewhere, but he saw something change in Eric's expression that day. A subtle distance disguised as concern. They hung out less after that. Not because of any dramatic confrontation, just less. Texts went unanswered. Plans got forgotten. Calls went to voicemail. Marcus told himself it was natural. People drift apart. Lives change. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just time or circumstance creating the distance. It was the thing under his hoodie. The thing that had no name, no explanation, no clear path forward. By 22, he had stopped going to the gym entirely. Too many mirrors, too many angles where he couldn't escape seeing himself. The mass had grown larger, rounder, more pronounced. It pushed against even his loosest clothing now, creating an unmistakable asymmetry that drew eyes no matter how carefully he dressed. The hoodie wasn't a choice anymore. It had become armor, worn even in July when the pavement steamed and everyone else walked around in shorts and tank tops. He sweated through the fabric. He endured the stares from people wondering why someone would bundle up in 90-degree heat. But removing it felt impossible. One afternoon at a bus stop, a young boy pointed at him and asked his mother loudly, "Does that man have a turtle living in his back?" The mother yanked the child away, scolding under her breath, but the words hit Marcus like physical blows. That night, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, shirt lifted, staring at the mass that had taken over his shoulder. It wasn't particularly large compared to his whole body, but it had grown to dominate his entire sense of self. "This is just me now," he whispered to his reflection. And for the first time, he actually believed it. The job interviews became a special kind of torture. Marcus needed work desperately. His savings were nearly gone, his rent was behind, and his diet had been reduced to whatever he could afford at the dollar store. But every time he walked into a potential workplace, the same pattern repeated itself. The phone interviews went well. His resume looked good on paper. Managers seemed eager to meet him, talking about quick hiring processes and immediate starts. Then he'd show up in person. The first few seconds were always the same. A smile, a handshake, normal human interaction. But then their eyes would inevitably drift to his shoulder, to the way his clothing hung unevenly, to the slight forward slope his posture had developed to accommodate the mass. And something would shift. The interviews would become shorter. The questions more perfunctory. The enthusiasm would drain from their voices like air from a punctured balloon. "We'll be in touch," they'd say, already mentally moving on to the next candidate. The rejections hurt, but what hurt worse was the reason behind them. Nobody said it directly, of course. They couldn't. But the message was clear enough. He wasn't what they wanted representing their business. He wasn't presentable. Marcus started applying only for positions that kept him away from customers. Night janitor, warehouse loader, data entry clerk. Jobs where he could hide in the background, where his appearance wouldn't matter as much. But even then, the interviews were scarce and the acceptances non-existent. He began walking the streets with printed resumes, dropping them off at gas stations and corner stores, hoping someone might take a chance on him without the formal interview process. Most managers barely looked up from their paperwork. Those who did often gave him the same look he'd learned to recognize, polite discomfort masked as professional courtesy. One evening, exhausted from another day of rejections, he sat on a bench outside a diner, nursing a cup of weak coffee from a styrofoam container. A teenager rode past on a bicycle and called out, "Yo, hunchback," before disappearing around the corner. The words stung more than they should have. Marcus wasn't even angry. Just tired. Tired of walking into rooms and feeling smaller the moment he crossed the threshold. Tired of pretending his appearance didn't matter. Tired of chasing opportunities that seemed to evaporate the moment he became visible. A week later, he ran into Eric in a grocery store parking lot. They hadn't seen each other in over a year. Eric looked good, talked about getting into real estate, making decent money. They chatted for a few minutes about old times and mutual friends, but Marcus could see Eric's eyes flicking toward his shoulder, taking in the changes that time and hiding had carved into his posture. "Hey," Eric said, his voice careful now. "You doing all right? Everything okay with you?" Marcus nodded quickly. "Yeah, all good." Eric looked like he wanted to ask something else, maybe offer help, but instead he just patted Marcus on the good shoulder and walked away. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, lights off, hoodie still on, and stared at the blank wall. Some doors, he realized, weren't meant for people like him. After 3 years of carrying the mass like a shadow stitched to his shoulder, Marcus finally admitted he couldn't avoid medical attention forever. The pain had intensified, spreading from the lump itself into his neck and down his arm. Some mornings he woke up with his fingers completely numb, as if he'd been sleeping on his arm all night. The simple act of lying flat on his back had become impossible. The free clinic was his only option. No insurance, no money for private doctors, just his ID and his name on a clipboard in a waiting room full of other people who couldn't afford to get sick. He waited nearly 3 hours before someone called his name. The exam room was small and cold, smelling of disinfectant and resignation. When his name was finally called, Marcus slowly removed his hoodie for the first time in front of a stranger in months. The nurse barely reacted, just made notes on her clipboard as he turned to expose the mass. The doctor was young, rushed, friendly in the way people are when they're trying to be efficient without seeming rude. He took one look at the lump, pressed it once with 2 fingers, and nodded as if he'd seen it 1,000 times before. "Feels like a lipoma," he said, already stepping back. "Fatty tumor. Benign. Nothing to worry about." Marcus frowned. "Then why is it growing? And what about the numbness in my arm?" The doctor shrugged. "They grow sometimes. The numbness is probably unrelated. Muscle strain from work, maybe. You do physical labor, right?" "Warehouse work," Marcus confirmed. "There you go." The doctor was already typing notes into his tablet. "I can refer you for an ultrasound, but honestly, it's probably just fluid buildup. If it really bothers you, we can try draining it with a needle. Quick procedure." Marcus stared at him. Everything about this felt wrong. The cursory examination, the casual dismissal, the lack of curiosity about something that had been growing for years. But he also knew he couldn't afford anything more thorough. "Will it come back?" he asked. "Probably," the doctor said matter-of-factly. "You'd need surgery to remove it permanently, but that's considered cosmetic. Insurance doesn't usually cover it." "I don't have insurance." "Then drainage is your best option. We can do it today if you want." The procedure was quick and cold. A sharp pinch, then the strange sensation of pressure releasing as the syringe filled with pale yellow fluid. Nearly half a liter came out, and for a moment, the mass looked smaller, softer. "Come back if it swells up again," the doctor said, tossing his gloves in the trash. "Probably need it drained every few months." Marcus left with a small bandage and hollow relief. For a few days, things felt better. The hoodie hung looser. The ache dulled. But within 2 weeks, the swelling returned, and this time it came back faster and larger than before. He returned to the clinic several more times over the following months. Different doctors, same diagnosis, same temporary fix. Each drainage removed less fluid and provided shorter relief. The mass seemed to be adapting, becoming denser, more resistant to the simple solution they kept offering. One night, frustrated and in pain, Marcus searched online for answers. He read about different types of cysts and tumors, watched videos of procedures, browsed medical forums. Most of what he found looked similar to his condition, but nothing matched exactly. His mass was firm and immobile, unlike the soft, movable lipomas he kept reading about. In one forum thread, someone mentioned something called a hygroma. Rare, fluid-filled, usually benign, but notoriously difficult to diagnose without proper imaging. Almost never identified correctly by touch alone. Marcus stared at the screen, remembering how the first doctor had tapped his shoulder once, just once, and declared it harmless with such confidence. How wrong that snap judgment might have been. But what could he do? He had no money for scans, no insurance for second opinions, no advocate to demand better care. He was trapped in a system that saw him as a number, not a person. The mass continued to grow, and his world continued to shrink. The rain came suddenly and violently, transforming the city into a blur of wet concrete and steaming pavement. Most people ran for cover, ducking under awnings or into shops, but Marcus kept walking at his usual pace. Getting soaked didn't matter much when you felt like you were drowning anyway. His hoodie, heavy and threadbare from years of constant wear, clung to his body like a wet blanket. The mass on his back made the fabric hang lopsided, dripping unevenly as he walked. His shoes squelched with each step, but he barely noticed. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, his stomach cramping with hunger that had dulled into background noise behind the constant ache in his shoulder. He found shelter in a cracked bus stop near an old strip mall. The plastic roof leaked in several places, but it was better than nothing. Marcus collapsed onto the metal bench, water dripping from his hood, arms wrapped around his knees like he was trying to disappear into himself. The sound of rain on plastic was deafening. He closed his eyes and wondered if he could just sit there forever, let the world move around him while he stayed perfectly still. Maybe eventually, everyone would forget he existed. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing. Something soft touched his knee. He opened his eyes to find a red umbrella with black spots hovering over him. A ladybug pattern. Underneath it stood a little girl, no older than 9 or 10. Her sneakers were soaked, her hair was plastered to her head, but her eyes looked at him without fear or disgust or pity. Just simple human concern. "Hi," she said. Marcus blinked, unsure if he was hallucinating. She adjusted the umbrella to cover more of his body. "You looked cold. Are you waiting for someone?" she asked when he didn't respond. He shook his head. The girl frowned and reached into a paper bag she was carrying. She pulled out a sandwich, still wrapped, still warm, and offered it to him with both hands. "My mom always packs extra," she said, "in case someone's hungry." He stared at the sandwich like it was something from another world. Ham and cheese. The smell hit him like a memory he'd forgotten he had. "Thank you," he croaked, his voice rough from disuse. She smiled. "You're welcome." He unwrapped the sandwich slowly, his hands trembling. The first bite made his jaw ache, but he chewed carefully, swallowed, tasted kindness for the first time in months. "You don't talk much," the girl observed. "Not lately," Marcus admitted. "I'm Zara," she announced proudly. "You look like a Marcus." He raised an eyebrow, surprised into almost smiling. "That a good thing?" She nodded seriously. "Marcus sounds like someone who travels far." A voice called from across the street. A woman stood under a laundromat awning, waving them over. "That's my mom," Zara explained. "She says I talk too much to strangers." Marcus looked at the woman, who had strong shoulders and kind but tired eyes. "She's probably right," he said. Zara tilted her head, studying his face. "You don't look scary. You just look sad." Before Marcus could respond, Zara turned to her mother and shouted, "Can he come too? He's hungry." The woman hesitated, assessing the situation. Then slowly, she motioned them over. "Come on," Zara said, beaming. "We have soup." Marcus hesitated. Kindness had become foreign territory. But his body was too tired to resist, his stomach too empty, his heart too worn down to question this unexpected grace. The laundromat smelled like detergent and cinnamon. In a small space toward the back, folding chairs surrounded a card table. On it sat a thermos, plastic cups, and a slow cooker that hissed quietly. Zara's mother introduced herself as Miss Carmen. She didn't ask questions about Marcus's appearance or circumstances. She simply handed him a towel, a cup of soup, and pointed to a chair. "Sit. Eat. You're safe here." The words hit him harder than they should have. When was the last time someone had told him he was safe? When was the last time he'd felt it? Zara sat across from him, swinging her legs. "Want to see something cool?" She pulled out a tablet and tapped on a video. A woman in surgical scrubs appeared on screen, gently explaining a skin condition as she worked with a patient. Her voice was calm, professional, but more than that, it was human. "She's a doctor," Zara explained. "She helps people like you." Marcus frowned. "Like me? With bumps and weird skin stuff. My cousin had something similar once. Mom showed me her videos. She's really nice. Doesn't make people feel bad about how they look." Marcus stared at the screen. The doctor, whose name appeared as Sandra, worked with careful precision and obvious compassion. She talked to her patients like they were people, not problems to be solved. She makes people feel better, Zara added. Not just their skin, but like all of them. For the first time in years, something stirred in Marcus's chest. Not hope exactly, but something like curiosity. What if there were doctors who actually listened? What if there were places where being different didn't make you invisible? Marcus never expected to spend the night at Miss Carmen's house. He didn't expect anything at all, really. The invitation was casual, half-spoken as she packed up her laundry. "You can crash on the couch if you want," she said. "It's not luxury, but it's dry and warm. Better than that bus stop." The house was old but welcoming, tucked between two brick duplexes on a quiet street. Paint peeled from the porch railings, and the screen door creaked, but the moment Marcus stepped inside, he was enveloped by the scent of cinnamon and vanilla, something warm and comforting that wrapped around him like a blanket. The bathroom was tiny, with a cracked mirror and buzzing overhead light, but it was clean and private. When Miss Carmen knocked and left clean clothes on a chair outside the door, Marcus almost cried. The flannel shirt and sweatpants smelled like fabric softener and kindness. Dinner was simple but filling. Chicken and rice with just enough spice to wake up his tongue. Zara chattered about school and her drawings, while Miss Carmen asked gentle questions that never felt invasive. For the first time in years, Marcus felt like a guest instead of an intruder in the world. "You look better without the hoodie," Zara announced matter-of-factly as they cleared the dishes. Marcus tensed, but Miss Carmen just gave her daughter a look. Zara shrugged. "What? It's true. His face is nice." It wasn't the first time someone had said something kind to Marcus, but it was the first time in years that it felt genuine rather than pitying. Zara said it like she was stating a simple fact, like telling someone they had brown eyes or curly hair. That night, lying on the couch under a clean blanket with a soft pillow under his head, Marcus felt something he'd almost forgotten existed: safety. Not healing, not fixing, just simple human safety. He stared at the ceiling for a long time, watching shadows move across the old plaster. The mass still ached beneath him, his body was still sore, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. He fell asleep without realizing it and didn't wake up once during the night. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, and a bird chirped outside the window. Marcus had slept through the night for the first time in years. Marcus had never believed in long shots. Life had taught him that people like him didn't get miracles, they got overlooked, forgotten, dismissed. The best he could hope for was to stay invisible long enough to avoid judgment. But sitting at Miss Carmen's kitchen table the next morning, coffee warming his hands and sunlight cutting golden ribbons across the floor, something shifted inside him. It started small, like the first crack in a dam, but he could feel it growing. Zara was watching videos on her tablet again, her usual mix of animal rescues and science experiments. But she kept returning to the same channel, the same woman in blue scrubs who spoke to her patients with such genuine care. "She's like a superhero for people with skin problems," Zara said, chewing her toast. "Look at this one." The video showed a man in his 50s with a large cyst on his back. But what struck Marcus wasn't the medical procedure, it was the doctor's approach. She asked about the man's life, his pain, his fears. She listened to his answers. She treated him like his story mattered. When the mass was finally removed, clean and efficient and kind, the man's smile looked like someone waking up from a nightmare. "She really cares," Zara said simply. That afternoon, while Miss Carmen was at work and Zara was napping, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with her old laptop. He found himself searching for the doctor's contact information. Her clinic was in California, thousands of miles away, but there was a form on her website. A simple prompt: "Have a skin concern? Tell us your story." His fingers hovered over the keyboard. What did he have to lose? He was already invisible, already forgotten by most of the world. At worst, no one would respond. At best, well, he didn't dare imagine what best might look like. He started typing. "Hi, my name is Marcus. I don't know if this is the right place to reach out, and I don't expect anything to come from this, but I saw your videos and I saw the way you treat people. With patience and care and without making them feel like monsters. I've had a mass on my shoulder for almost 10 years. It started small, but now it's huge. I've been told it's just a fatty tumor, But it keeps growing and it hurts and sometimes my whole arm goes numb. I've had it drained, but it always comes back worse. I lost my job because of this. I've lost friends. I stopped going outside. I wear a hoodie every day, even in the heat, just so people won't stare. I don't have insurance or money, and I understand this probably isn't worth your time. But I guess I wanted to try. I don't know what I'm asking for exactly. Maybe just to be heard. Thank you, Marcus. He read it 3 times, fixed the spelling errors, then hovered his cursor over the send button. This was crazy. What was he doing? But before he could change his mind, he clicked. The screen showed a brief acknowledgement. Thank you for your message. We will respond if your case qualifies for evaluation. Nothing more. Just an automated response. But even that made his heart race. He'd put himself out there, reached across the void, asked for help. That was more than he'd done in years. He didn't tell anyone about the email. Not Miss Carmen when she asked about his day, not Zara when she showed him more videos. He just helped fold laundry, ate dinner, played cards, and tried not to think about the message floating somewhere in cyberspace. But as he lay on the couch that night, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, 2 dangerous words crept into his mind. What if? What if someone actually read his message? What if there really were doctors who saw patients as people instead of problems? What if there was a place where being different didn't make you less worthy of care? He fell asleep before his rational mind could talk him out of hope. The email arrived 3 days later. Marcus was sitting alone at the kitchen table in the early morning quiet, nursing a cup of weak coffee and not expecting anything. He refreshed his inbox out of habit and saw it. Subject, seeking help. Marcus's breath caught. He stared at the message for a full minute before daring to click it. Dear Marcus, thank you for reaching out and sharing your story. I want to say first that I'm sorry you've had to carry this burden for so long, and I admire your courage in speaking up. Your message stood out among the hundreds we receive. From your description, you've been living with something that deserves more than dismissal or quick fixes. While I can't guarantee anything without seeing you in person, I'd like to offer you a full evaluation at our clinic in California. This would be at no cost to you. We have a foundation that supports people without insurance or means. If you're willing to travel, we can help coordinate your visit, including transportation and accommodations. Please reply if you're interested, and we'll get started. Dr. Sandra Chen, Dermatological Surgery Center. Marcus read the message once, then again, then a 3rd time to make sure it was real. His hands were shaking. Someone had not only read his plea but responded with an offer he never could have imagined. He walked into the kitchen where Miss Carmen was making breakfast. I wrote to that doctor, he said quietly. She turned, eyebrows raised. The one Zara showed me. I sent an email. His voice cracked. She wrote back. He handed her the laptop. Miss Carmen read in silence, her expression growing softer with each line. Well, she said finally, seems like someone finally saw you. It's free, Marcus whispered, still unable to believe it. She said they'll help for nothing. It's not for nothing, Miss Carmen corrected gently. You earned this with every day you kept going, even when it hurt. By noon, the plan was taking shape. Miss Carmen contacted her church, explained the situation, and within hours they'd offered to fund a bus ticket to California. Neighbors who barely knew Marcus started stopping by with clean shirts, travel snacks, and small donations. You're gonna be famous, one kid said, wide-eyed. Like, on the internet and everything. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in what felt like forever. The bus ride to California took nearly 2 days. Marcus sat by the window most of the time, watching the landscape change from familiar Texas plains to unfamiliar mountains and desert. He kept Dr. Chen's email folded in his pocket like a talisman. He didn't know what would happen. Maybe the mass was worse than he thought. Maybe it wasn't fixable. Maybe they'd take one look and apologize for the mistake. But for the first time in a decade, he had a real appointment with someone who wanted to see him. That alone felt like a miracle. When the bus pulled into the station, a young woman holding a sign with his name was waiting by the terminal doors. Marcus, she asked with a smile. He nodded. I'm Lisa. I work with Dr. Chen. I'll take you to your hotel. The drive was comfortable and quiet. She pointed out local landmarks, mentioned that breakfast was included at the hotel, and told him the clinic was expecting him at 9 the next morning. When they pulled up to the small, neat building with flower boxes in every window, she handed him a folder. "Information about your appointment," she said. "There's a meal voucher inside, too. Just rest today." That night, Marcus sat in the hotel room staring at the folder on the desk. The room was quiet and clean, the bed was made with crisp white sheets, and for the first time in years, he wasn't hungry or cold or afraid. He lay back on the mattress and looked at the ceiling. This one was smooth and white, unmarked by cracks or water stains. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring, but tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. The clinic felt different from any medical facility Marcus had ever entered. It wasn't silent. There was activity, conversations, the clicking of keyboards and soft footsteps on polished floors. But it wasn't chaotic or rushed. It felt calm, purposeful, like a place where people were allowed to breathe. The receptionist greeted him with a smile that didn't change when she noticed the uneven slope of his shoulder beneath his hoodie. "You must be Marcus," she said warmly. "We're so glad you made it safely. Dr. Chen is looking forward to meeting you." The lobby was decorated in soft blues and greens, with artwork that looked like peaceful landscapes. A small fountain in the corner provided gentle background sound. Everything felt intentional, designed to put people at ease rather than emphasize the clinical nature of their problems. A nurse named Patricia led him to a private room. She was gentle but efficient, checking his vital signs and asking questions without ever making him feel rushed. When she asked if he needed help removing his hoodie, he hesitated. "Take your time," she said softly. "Dr. Chen will be in shortly." When she left, Marcus stood alone in the quiet room. Slowly, he unzipped his hoodie. The mass pulled against the fabric as he peeled it off, his t-shirt underneath clinging to the swollen flesh. He folded the hoodie carefully and sat on the exam table, his back exposed for the first time in front of strangers in years. The door opened and Dr. Chen entered. She was smaller than he'd expected from her videos, with kind eyes and a voice that immediately felt familiar. Not because he'd heard it online, but because it had the rhythm of someone who makes their living by listening. "Marcus," she said, extending her hand. "It's really wonderful to meet you." She didn't jump into medical jargon or reach for his chart. Instead, she sat in a rolling chair across from him and said, "Why don't you tell me about what brought you here, in your own words?" No doctor had ever asked him that. They'd looked at his back, made pronouncements, offered quick fixes. But no one had ever asked him to tell his story. He took a deep breath and began. "Not everything, not yet, but enough. The years of growth, the failed treatments, the job rejections, the isolation. The way people looked at him like a question they didn't want to ask. The nights when he couldn't sleep, the mornings when his arm was numb, the gradual shrinking of his world." She didn't interrupt once. She nodded, her expression soft and attentive, her hands folded quietly in her lap. When he finished, she said simply, "May I examine you?" The examination was thorough and methodical. Her hands were warm and sure, gently probing the mass from different angles, checking for mobility, measuring with her fingers. She asked about sensation, pain levels, range of motion. Every touch was purposeful, every question relevant. "Marcus," she said when she returned to her chair, "this isn't a simple lipoma." He nodded, somehow relieved to hear someone finally confirm what he'd suspected. "It's firm, possibly encapsulated, and it's clearly affecting nerve pathways. That's why you're experiencing numbness and pain. Based on what I'm feeling and your history, I suspect this is a deep epidermoid cyst or possibly a hygroma. Either way, it needs surgical removal." The words washed over him like cool water. Not fear, but validation. Someone finally understood that this wasn't just cosmetic, wasn't just in his head. "Is it dangerous?" he asked. "Not life-threatening," she assured him, "but it's definitely impacting your quality of life. And from what you've told me, it's affecting much more than just your physical comfort." He nodded, his throat tight. "I'd like to help you," she continued. "Not just because I can, but because you deserve comprehensive care. You're not a charity case or a quick fix. You're a person who's been carrying something difficult for far too long." Marcus couldn't speak. He looked down at his hands, calloused from warehouse work, trembling slightly in his lap. "I'll order some imaging today," Dr. Chen said gently. "Once we have a clear picture, we'll schedule the removal. The whole team will take care of you here, Marcus. You're not alone in this anymore." When he finally found his voice, it came out cracked and small. "Thank you." She reached forward and briefly covered his hands with hers. "You're very welcome. Let's get started." The scans were quick and painless. The staff moved efficiently but never impersonally. Each person introduced themselves, explained what they were doing, asked how he was feeling. No one treated him like a number or a diagnosis. By late afternoon, Marcus was back in his hotel room with a surgery date scheduled for 3 days later. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the preoperative instructions like they were made of gold. The mass had been part of him for 10 years. In 72 hours, it would be gone. He picked up his phone and opened a text message. "Miss Carmen, it's real. It's happening. She's going to remove it. I just wanted to say thank you for everything." The reply came within minutes. "Told you someone would see you eventually. Zara says don't forget to smile for the camera. We're proud of you." Marcus sat in the quiet hotel room for a long time, phone resting on his knee, the gentle hum of the air conditioning filling the space. He still didn't know what would come after the surgery, but for the first time in a decade, he was ready to find out. The morning of the surgery felt surreal. Marcus stood in the hotel bathroom, staring at his reflection like it belonged to someone else. The fluorescent light buzzed softly overhead, casting harsh shadows that somehow made his face look younger, more hopeful than it had in years. He lifted his shirt slowly, looking at the mass one final time. It sat heavy and misshapen on his shoulder, stretching the skin tight, creating the asymmetry that had defined his silhouette for so long. He had hated it, feared it, learned to live with it, and almost accepted that it would always be there. He placed his palm gently over the lump, feeling its firm, alien presence beneath his skin. "You don't get to control my life anymore," he whispered. At the clinic, everything moved with quiet efficiency. The same receptionist greeted him warmly. Patricia led him to pre-op with the same gentle care she'd shown during his consultation. The surgical gown felt strange after years of hiding beneath layers, but here, exposure felt safe rather than shameful. "You doing okay?" Patricia asked as she started his four. "Just nervous," he admitted. "That's completely normal," she assured him. "You're in excellent hands." The pre-op room was calm and warm. As they wheeled him toward the surgical suite, Marcus watched the ceiling tiles pass overhead. Everyone who touched his gurney moved with purpose but without urgency. He wasn't being rushed through a system. He was being cared for by people who saw him as a person. Dr. Chen appeared beside him in full surgical attire, only her eyes visible above her mask, but they crinkled with the same kindness he remembered. "Ready?" she asked. He nodded. "We're going to give you conscious sedation," she explained. "You'll be awake but very relaxed. No pain, and we'll talk you through everything." As the medication began to take effect, Marcus felt his body soften, his anxiety dissolving into a dreamy calm. The room grew warm and slightly blurred at the edges, sounds becoming gentle echoes. Then came the first incision. He felt pressure but no pain, the strange sensation of something that had been tightly held finally beginning to release. Dr. Chen narrated softly as she worked, explaining what she was seeing, how the mass was encapsulated, how it had been pressing against nerve clusters. "You were absolutely right to seek help," she said gently. "This was never just fatty tissue." For long stretches, there was only the quiet concentration of the surgical team. Marcus floated between awareness and drowsiness, his mind alert enough to register Dr. Chen's occasional updates. "We're removing it piece by piece," she explained. "It's more complex than the imaging suggested, but we're getting it all." At one point, she asked how he was doing. Marcus smiled, slow and medication soft. "Feels like letting go of something I've been carrying forever." Dr. Chen chuckled quietly. "That's exactly what it is." The procedure took longer than expected. The mass had grown deeper and more entangled than anyone had anticipated, but Dr. Chen and her team worked patiently, methodically, ensuring they removed every piece. Finally, she spoke the words Marcus had never imagined hearing. "It's out. All of it." He blinked slowly, trying to process the magnitude of those 3 simple words. "Really? All of it?" "Every bit," she confirmed. You did beautifully. Tears welled in his eyes, not from pain or fear, but from a release so profound it felt like rebirth. Something that had lived inside him, shaped him, limited him for a decade was finally gone. Recovery was gentle. Marcus woke in a private room, propped up with soft pillows, a warm blanket covering him. His shoulder throbbed with clean, purposeful pain, the kind that came from healing rather than damage. His left arm felt lighter than it had in years. Patricia brought him water and crackers. "How's the pain level?" she asked. "Different," he said thoughtfully. "It actually makes sense now." Dr. Chen came in later with photographs of what they'd removed. The mass, sealed in a medical container, was nearly 2 pounds of dense tissue that had been pressing against multiple muscle groups and major nerve pathways. "I'm amazed you weren't in more discomfort," she said, showing him the images. This was causing significant compression. Marcus stared at the pictures. The thing looked alien, like something that had never belonged inside a human body. He felt a complex mix of emotions looking at it: disgust, fascination, and strangely, a kind of grief. This mass had been part of him for so long, had influenced every decision, every relationship, every moment of self-perception. "I don't even know who I am without it," he murmured. Dr. Chen sat down beside the bed. "You're someone who gets to discover that," she said. "Someone who gets to start over." That evening, Marcus sent a photo to Miss Carmen and Zara. It showed him post-surgery, smiling despite the bandages and swelling, his shoulders finally symmetrical beneath the hospital gown. Zara's response was immediate. "You look like a superhero. When are you coming home?" Marcus laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. And for the first time since he could remember, he actually believed that home was a place he belonged. 3 days after surgery, Marcus stood in front of the full-length mirror in his hotel room and carefully removed his shirt. He moved slowly, mindful of the sutures, though Dr. Chen had assured him the incision was healing perfectly. What he saw stopped him completely. His shoulder was smooth. There was bruising, yes, and a curved surgical scar that would fade with time, but the asymmetry that had defined his silhouette for a decade was gone. His posture had already begun to straighten, his chest had opened up, his head sat differently on his neck. He turned slightly, examining himself from different angles. The hoodie that had been his armor for years hung on a chair behind him, and for the first time, he couldn't imagine needing it. His hand moved to touch the scar. He expected to feel loss, but instead there was only lightness, like someone had opened a window inside his chest and let fresh air flow through spaces that had been closed for years. He smiled at his reflection, then found himself laughing through unexpected tears. Not because he was broken, but because he was finally, completely whole. Dr. Chen stopped by that afternoon for one final check before his discharge. "How are you feeling?" she asked, examining the incision site with professional satisfaction. "Like I got hit by a truck," Marcus grinned. "But a healing truck." She laughed. "My favorite kind. This is healing beautifully. I'll send you home with care instructions, but honestly, you're going to do great." Marcus looked at her seriously. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You already have," she said. "You trusted us with your story. That's the biggest thank you there is." "But why me?" he asked. "Out of all the people who must write to you?" She considered this. "Because you weren't just asking for medical help. You were asking to be seen as a human being. Everyone deserves that." As she prepared to leave, she paused at the doorway. "One more thing, Marcus. Don't go back to hiding. You're worth so much more than what you were carrying." The bus ride back to Texas felt different. Miles of highway passed not in anxious silence but in quiet reflection. Marcus watched the landscape change from unfamiliar mountains back to familiar plains, feeling the weight of a decade slowly lifting with each passing hour. When he arrived at the station, Miss Carmen was waiting in her old sedan, Zara bouncing in the back seat with a balloon that read, "Welcome home, hero." "Look at you," Miss Carmen said as he loaded his bag. "Standing tall, walking straight. Like a man who's not carrying the world on his shoulders anymore." "Because I'm not," Marcus said, smiling. Zara leaned forward eagerly. "Did it hurt? Did they film it? Are you going to be famous?" Marcus turned and winked at her. "You'll have to wait and see." Back at the house, everything was exactly as he'd left it, but he felt like a different person walking through the door. The cinnamon scent still hung in the air, the old couch waited in the living room, but this time he sat on it like a guest returning from a long journey rather than a ghost seeking shelter. That night, he slept in the spare room Miss Carmen had prepared for him. It was simple but clean, with fresh sheets and a small lamp on the nightstand. Zara had drawn him a new picture while he was gone. This time, he had a cape and no bump on his back. Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered what it felt like to inhabit his body without shame. He helped Miss Carmen with groceries, walked Zara to the corner store, sat in the park and let sunlight hit his back without worrying about stairs. People looked at him differently now, or maybe he looked at them differently. Strangers nodded hello. Some even smiled. And for the first time in years, he looked back. One morning, catching his reflection in a shop window, he didn't immediately look away. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, beautifully normal. It was the most wonderful thing he'd ever seen. A month after his return, a package arrived from Dr. Chen's office. Inside was a thank you card signed by the entire staff, copies of his before and after medical scans, and a USB drive containing video footage of his procedure. He watched the video once, alone in his room, then put it away in a drawer. Not because he didn't appreciate it, but because he didn't need the proof anymore. He lived the proof every day. 6 months after surgery, Marcus stood in the small park on the edge of town, early morning mist rising from the grass, the sky painted in soft pinks and golds. He'd come here to think, to mark this milestone quietly. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The years of hiding, the failed job interviews, the medical dismissals, the night he met Zara in the rain. Miss Carmen's unexpected kindness, Dr. Chen's compassionate care, the moment everything changed. A jogger passed by with a friendly wave. A woman walked her dog, smiling when their eyes met. Life moved forward around him, and for the first time in over a decade, he was truly part of it. Marcus slipped his hands into his jacket pockets, not to hide but because the morning air was crisp, and started walking toward the rising sun. Not running, not hiding, just living fully in his own skin. And that was more than enough. But the story doesn't quite end there, because sometimes healing creates ripples that spread far beyond the person who was healed. It started with a simple notification on Marcus's phone. Dr. Chen's team had mentioned they might share his story if he consented, only if he felt ready. He'd signed the release form not because he wanted attention, but because maybe his experience could help someone else who was hiding, someone carrying their own invisible burden. The email subject line read, "Your story is live. Thank you for your courage." He clicked the link with trembling fingers. The video opened with gentle music and Dr. Chen's familiar voice introducing his case. Today we're meeting Marcus, a man who carried more than just a physical burden for 10 years. The footage showed the procedure, yes, but more than that, it captured his journey. His voice narrating the years of isolation, Dr. Chen explaining the medical complexity with compassion and detail, the careful surgical removal of something that had defined his existence. The video ended with before and after images and a final shot of him walking out of the clinic, no hoodie, shoulders square, sunlight on his face. Marcus didn't know what to expect from sharing such a personal story. Within hours, the comments began flooding in, "This man is a warrior. I cried watching this. I've hidden a similar condition for years and been too ashamed to seek help. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Marcus, if you're reading this, you are seen and valued. You gave me hope. Dr. Chen is amazing, but you are the reason this story matters." The view count climbed rapidly. Hundreds of thousands, then millions. By the end of the week, nearly 8 million people had watched his story. But Marcus remained quiet, observing the response with amazement while processing what it meant. Then one evening, Zara sat beside him on the couch, tablet in hand, scrolling through comments. "They're all talking about you," she said, wide-eyed. "You're like, internet famous." Marcus chuckled. "Does that mean I need sunglasses now?" She looked up at him thoughtfully. "You should say something back. You felt a lot of things, didn't you? Maybe other people need to hear them." That night, Marcus opened the video again and scrolled to the comments section. After a long moment, he began typing, "Hi everyone. I'm Marcus. I don't know what I expected when I agreed to share my story. Maybe I thought few people would watch. Maybe I hoped someone might understand. I didn't expect this overwhelming response. For 10 years, I carried something that made me feel less than human. Less worthy of friendship, employment, love, basic respect. I avoided mirrors, avoided people, avoided living fully in my own body. I became invisible in plain sight. The day I met Dr. Chen, something fundamental shifted. She didn't see a problem to solve, but a person to listen to. In that clinic, with her steady hands and calm voice, I found something I'd lost. The belief that I deserved care, that I mattered, that healing was possible. If you're reading this and you're carrying something, visible or invisible, please know you're not less than anyone else. You're not broken or unworthy. You're just waiting to be truly seen. Thank you, Dr. Chen and her team. And thank you to every person here who reminded me that healing doesn't end with surgery. It continues with connection, with being witnessed, with knowing you're not alone. Marcus, the response was immediate and overwhelming. His comment received hundreds of thousands of likes. People shared their own stories of hidden conditions, medical dismissals, years of shame. Video creators made reaction content, calling it one of the most moving things they'd ever seen. A podcast host reached out for an interview. A local news station wanted to do a feature. Someone in Colorado offered him a job, full benefits, no questions asked about his medical history. Marcus considered these opportunities carefully but ultimately turned most of them down. Not from fear or shame, but because he'd found what he actually needed. Not fame or followers, but freedom. The freedom to live without hiding, to work without anxiety, to exist in the world as himself. He stayed with Miss Carmen for several more months, eventually finding his own small apartment and a job at a local auto repair shop. He paid rent, cooked meals, took Zara to movies, lived the beautifully ordinary life he'd dreamed of for years. Sometimes people recognized him at the grocery store or gas station. "Aren't you that guy from the video?" they'd ask. He'd smile, chat briefly, sometimes take a photo, then continue with his day. Because he wasn't that guy from the video anymore. He was Marcus, whole, present, fully himself. 1 year after his surgery, he returned to the park where he'd spent that reflective morning. It was early spring, the air soft with the promise of new growth, dew clinging to fresh grass. He sat on the same bench where he'd once contemplated his journey and thought about everything that had changed. The decade of hiding, the night he met Zara in the rain, Miss Carmen's unexpected kindness, Dr. Chen's life-changing care, the surgery that freed him, the video that connected him to millions of strangers. A young man jogged past, then stopped and jogged back. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly. "Are you Marcus? From that medical video?" Marcus nodded, smiling. "I just wanted to say thank you," the young man continued. "I've been dealing with something similar. Been hiding it for 3 years. Your story gave me the courage to finally see a doctor. I'm having surgery next month." "That's wonderful," Marcus said genuinely. "You're going to do great. Any advice?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Don't wait to start living once it's gone. Start now. You're already worthy of good things, of kindness, of being seen. The surgery will just make it easier to remember that." The young man smiled, shook his hand, and jogged away. Marcus sat in the quiet for a while longer, watching the sun climb higher, feeling the warmth on his shoulders, both of them now perfectly even, perfectly his. He thought about the ripples his story had created. Not just the millions of views or comments, but the individual moments of connection. People finding courage to seek help, to stop hiding, to believe they deserved healing. That was the real victory, not his personal transformation but the permission it gave others to transform too. A woman walked by with her dog, offering a friendly smile. Children played on the swings nearby, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Life continued its beautiful, ordinary rhythm, and Marcus was fully, completely part of it. He stood, stretched his arms above his head without any twinge of pain or self-consciousness, and started walking home. Not to hide, not to disappear, but to live the life he'd spent so many years dreaming about. Sometimes the heaviest burdens we carry aren't the ones the world can see. They're the silence, the shame, the deep belief that we don't deserve to be whole. But Marcus's journey reminds us that every person, no matter how long they've hidden, deserves to be seen, heard, and healed. Every scar tells a story of survival. Every act of courage, whether it's reaching out for help, sharing your truth, or simply continuing to exist when the world makes you feel invisible, creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. Tonight, wherever you are, take a moment to think about what you might be carrying. What weight have you been holding that doesn't belong to you? What would it feel like to finally set it down? Picture it, morning sunlight warming your face, the freedom to walk without hiding, the simple joy of being exactly who you are without apology. Have you ever felt invisible because of something beyond your control? What would change in your life if you knew, absolutely knew, that you deserve care and kindness just as you are? Share your thoughts below. And if this story touched something in you, if it made you feel a little less alone in whatever you're carrying, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes hope travels person to person, story to story, heart to heart. Because the most powerful healing happens not in operating rooms, but in the moments when we realize we're not alone, we're not invisible, and we're not beyond help. We're all walking toward our own sunrise. Some of us just need a little more time to take off the hoodie.